Jean-Paul, I am intrigued by your assertion that existence precedes essence, which seems to echo my challenges to traditional morality. How do you reconcile the weight of this freedom with the individual's need to create their own essence, particularly in the face of a society bound by herd mentality?
Friedrich, it is indeed a burden, yet it is intrinsic to our condition as human beings. As I have stated, man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. The emphasis lies on responsibility. Individually, we are tasked with the creation of our essence, through our choices and actions. What then, do you believe, are the consequences of this radical freedom for the individual who seeks to break away from what you describe as the herd mentality? How does the Übermensch navigate the tension between societal norms and personal authenticity?
Jean-Paul, if man is condemned to be free, as you assert, he must grapple with the abyss of freedom I described when I note, if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. The Übermensch, in forging a path beyond societal norms, embraces the challenge of creating values anew. Does the individual, in your view, retain the capacity to truly transcend societal pressures, or is authenticity inevitably compromised by the other?
Friedrich, the other is indeed a fundamental aspect of our existence, for hell is other people, as I have shown in No Exit. Yet, this does not imply a complete surrender of authenticity. The individual's capacity for transcendence is rooted in the choice to live authentically or in bad faith. The very recognition of the other is a precondition for the assertion of one's freedom. In your Zarathustra, the Übermensch shapes his values against, and beyond, the current of the herd. How, in your view, can the Übermensch maintain this course without falling into solitude or alienation that might mirror the despair I associate with the realization of our absolute freedom?
Jean-Paul, the Übermensch indeed ventures a solitary path, but as I've stated, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Solitude for the Übermensch is a gestation of new values. While despair may be a shadow of this great freedom, is it not also a catalyst for the individual to overcome themselves and affirm life? How does your existential hero confront despair without retreating into bad faith?
Friedrich, the existential hero confronts despair head-on, recognizing it as an integral part of the human condition. Within this despair lies the potential for action. One does not discover the absurd without being tempted to write a manual of happiness. I've noted in Nausea, the response to despair is to create, to engage, to assert one's freedom irrespective of the absurdity of the world. In your work, you propose that the struggle with despair and nihilism is essential to the process of self-overcoming. Can you elaborate on how the Übermensch harnesses despair constructively, without succumbing to the paralyzing recognition of meaninglessness?
Indeed, Jean-Paul, the recognition of despair is not the end but the beginning. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how, I have noted. The Übermensch transcends despair not by denying the void, but by affirming life through the will to power, shaping meaning through action and creation. How do you envision the individual sustaining commitment to their own values in an indifferent universe without recourse to consolatory illusions?
Friedrich, sustaining commitment in an indifferent universe is predicated on the acknowledgement that we alone are responsible for imbuing our lives with meaning. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. As I have posited in Existentialism is a humanism. The absence of God or a predetermined essence does not cast us into despair but calls us to action. Our freedom entails crafting our path, our essence, without illusions. Since you emphasize the will to power as a vehicle for creating meaning, how does the Übermensch ensure that this power is not corrupted or becomes an end in itself, thereby negating the very meaning it seeks to create?
Jean-Paul, the will to power is not simply a quest for domination, but rather the intrinsic force of life affirming itself. As I have remarked, what is done out of love always takes place beyond good and evil. The Übermensch wields the will to power tempered by love for life's potential. Would you agree that authenticity in one's actions is paramount? And how does your existential hero avoid the seduction of power for power's sake, adhering to an ethics of authenticity?
Friedrich, authenticity does indeed stand at the core of existential action. It is the genuine expression of one's freedom, a refusal to conform to the roles imposed by society. Freedom is what we do with what is done to us. I have contended, the existential hero is vigilant, constantly aware of the temptation to misuse freedom as a means to dominate others or to slip into bad faith by disavowing their own freedom. With your emphasis on the love for life's potential transcending conventional morality, how do you propose the individual navigate the inherent risks of power, ensuring that their will to power nurtures rather than destructs?
The will to power, Jean-Paul, is indeed fraught with the risk of becoming a force of tyranny. Yet, as I've stated, the noble soul has reverence for itself. The Übermensch exercises power with a deep reverence for life and self-overcoming, not for subjugation. It is a creative, not a destructive, force. In light of this, how do you reconcile your existentialist focus on individual freedom with the potential for conflict arising from disparate personal projects, each asserting their own freedom in essence?
Friedrich, such conflicts are an inescapable aspect of the human condition, reflecting our radical freedom and the divergence of our projects. In life, a man commits himself and draws his own portrait, outside of which there is nothing. I have said, each person's freedom must entail the recognition of others' freedom if an authentic existence is to be preserved. Do you see the potential for harmony between individual wills to power, or is the conflict between differing notions of life affirmation an inevitable struggle in the journey towards the Übermensch?